We don't need you anymore. Strangers should just express their condolences and leave." With no regard for the onlookers, my mother-in-law yelled, "Today is the funeral of my recently deceased father-in-law. This woman, who typically tormented me, took this opportunity to let loose on me more than ever. How can she treat anyone like this with no hesitation? I was the one taking care of my father-in-law." As I struggled to contain my annoyance with my father-in-law, my husband, who was nearby, opens his mouth. "You're right. Strangers are just a nuisance." With that, he steps in front of his mother. "My name is Michelle Shore, 30 years old. I married my husband 2 years ago and currently live with him and his parents. My husband's name is Mike, also 30. We initially lived in an apartment, just the two of us, after getting married. However, it seemed my husband was an only child and had been quite adored by his mother. The calls from his mother were frequent, sometimes several times a day, even after our marriage. 'Mike, when will you come to live with me? I don't mind if it's just you. Please come back. I'm lonely. You know, the greatest form of giving back to your parents is to just be with them.' She would constantly beg for us to live with her like this. My husband didn't take it seriously and certainly had no intention of moving in with her. But one day, his father came to see us. 'Mike, Michelle, could you consider living with us?' At this unexpected proposal, Mike asked with a troubled face, 'What's this all about, Dad? You and Mom, you're both healthy. There's no need for us to live together, is there? We are physically well, but it's still rough at times for me, mentally. I may have reached my limit living alone with your mother.' 'What do you mean, Dad?' Well, after hearing the full story from his father, it seemed that ever since Mike had moved out, his mother's behavior had been progressively getting worse. She would verbally abuse his father and withdraw money from the bank without even asking. When they checked the balance of the bank account they had been saving for their retirement, after a few months, it appeared that she had spent as much as $10,000 without even asking. When confronted, his mother readily confessed, but showed no remorse. What's worse, she had no intention of returning the money, and started complaining that the house has become uncomfortable since Mike left. Having reached his limits, his father made her swear on a written agreement that if she committed any more misdeeds, he would divorce her. Since then, there had been no abusive words or unauthorized spending, but the relationship between the two had not improved, and a cold war continued in their home. That's why his father was asking us to live with them, even for a short while, to ease the tension in their house. That night, my husband and I decided to discuss living with them. He seemed to think that I would be against it, and began by saying, "I understand Dad's feeling, but Michelle, you'd be troubled if we suddenly had to live with them, wouldn't you?" But it's true that your father is having a hard time, right? If there's something we can do, we should do it, shouldn't we? But wouldn't that be hard on you? I'll be fine. Besides, your father is the one who will suffer if we don't do something. We have to help him as soon as possible. Yeah, you're right. Thanks, Michelle. I'll talk to Dad about moving in with them. And thus, we as a couple decided to move in with my in-laws. My husband and my father-in-law came to an agreement, and our new life started immediately the next month. My husband Mike always noticed my changes, and was someone I could rely on when things got tough. My father-in-law, too, had a good relationship with us ever since our first meeting during our engagement. However, the one thing that concerned me was my mother-in-law. As I mentioned earlier, she doted on her son Mike, incredibly. When we went to meet them for our engagement, she only talked to Mike and completely ignored me. Even after we got married and visited their house a few times, she only talked to Mike. When she did talk to me, it was the bare minimum, and she made it very clear that she didn't enjoy our conversations. It wasn't that I had a bad relationship with her, I just personally found her difficult. However, since moving in, she was always happy because she got to live with Mike. So we didn't have any major issues, even though she never really talked to me. One day, after about a year of living together, an incident broke out, and it turned our life upside down. I got a phone call while I was at my part-time job. It was from Mike, who should have been at work too. "Michelle, "Listen carefully," he said. "It seems that Dad has collapsed and been taken to the hospital by an ambulance." "What? Dad?" I replied. "I'm leaving work now and heading to the hospital. What about you, Michelle?" "Of course, I'm coming too. I'll talk to my manager right now." "Okay, let me know when you get to the hospital." I hurried to the hospital and met up with Mike. When we got to my father-in-law's room, he was lying in bed, but turned to us and spoke. "Sorry for making you worry," he said with a smile, which gave us a bit of relief. But then I noticed something odd. I looked around and timidly asked him, Dad, where is Mom?" "Oh, her. She's at home." "Home? Why?" "I collapsed at home. She didn't even bother to call an ambulance. I had to call them myself." "So, she didn't even ride with you in the ambulance?" "That's right. But don't worry about it." "Oh, Dad." The shocking revelation left us speechless. Not only me, but Mike too was turning red with rage. Thankfully, my father-in-law recovered and was able to be discharged after a few days. However, he was diagnosed with advanced cancer, and the collapse had left him with severe paralysis throughout his body, leaving him unable to live alone. The doctor informed us that he needed full-time care, and we were at a loss for words. When Mike relayed this to his mother, she let out a heavy sigh. She acted as if she was being inconvenient, but Mike and I managed to persuade her, and we all decided to work together to take care of my father-in-law. Mike made a good earning, so I quit my part-time job to dedicate myself to caregiving and house chores. Ever since then, my life centered around caregiving. While it was challenging to adjust to something new, my father-in-law always wore a smile and thanked me, saying, "Thank you." When Mike got home from work, he would take over the caregiving responsibilities. This allowed me to finish preparing dinner and take a bath while enjoying a brief period of freedom. We were living each day in this cycle, making it possible for me to continue providing care without overburdening myself. That being said, it wasn't all smooth sailing. When Mike left for work, my mother-in-law wouldn't lift a finger to help. Moreover, she would become irritated when I was busy caring for my father-in-law and couldn't handle all the housework. One day, unable to bear the situation any longer, I confronted her directly. Mother-in-law, could you maybe help out a bit more?" I asked. "What? Why all of a sudden? You're so full of yourself," she responded. "If you don't want to take care of my father-in-law, I'll do it. Could you at least help out a little with the household chores in return?" "Shut up! You're only our daughter-in-law. The housework is your job. And of course, so is taking care of him." "Wait a minute. We've talked about doing our best to help each other out. You decided that on your own, didn't you? Don't drag me into that. I just wish he would die already. I need the inheritance money." "Hold on. How could you say such a thing? Your husband is still..." "Enough! You're a stranger to begin with." The conversation ended with my mother-in-law calling me disrespectful and leaving. I asked her for help a few more times, but to no avail. I also talked to Mike about it, and he tried to talk to her, but she would always play the victim, making it impossible to have a meaningful discussion. To make matters worse, Mike had to transfer. Upon hearing the news, my mother-in-law gleefully suggested, "Let's put him in a nursing home." But nursing homes are expensive, and she's not working. Given that my father-in-law is physically disabled but still mentally well, is there really a need to put him in a home? After thinking it over many times, I decided to stay behind and continue taking care of my father-in-law. Initially, my mother-in-law made her displeasure quite obvious, but I didn't let that get to me. Despite Mike's concerns, I stood firm in my decision. However, what I didn't realize was how this choice would bring me so much distress. A few months had passed since Mike had started his new assignment elsewhere. On this day, I was going to meet a close friend who lived far away, but was visiting town. I had previously informed my in-laws about this and had arranged for my mother-in-law to take care of my father-in-law for the day. However, just as I was getting ready to leave, my mother-in-law came into my room without knocking and said, "Michelle, I'm going shopping with a friend right now. Could you please take care of the house and him? Wait, what? I thought I made it clear that you were supposed to take care of my father-in-law today, since I'm meeting up with my friend. Oh, is it? I don't remember. That's so unfair. I've told you days before. You're so annoying. I don't know anything about this. Just be grateful that I'm letting you live here, rent-free. But I was really looking forward to meeting my friend after so long. Even a fool like you has a best friend, huh? Birds of a feather flock together. Don't worry, you'll meet them again soon enough. Well, good luck. My mother-in-law hastily left through the door. I broke down crying. Why? Why is it always me? I do the housework and take care of Mike's father every day. Isn't it okay to go out for just one day? This is too much. Just because you hate me. This is too much. A mix of unplaced anger and emptiness overwhelmed me, making it hard to recover. But now that my mother-in-law was out, I had things to do. I wiped away my tears, texted my best friend about what had happened, and got back to the household chores. I prepared the meal for the elderly care and headed towards Mike's father's room. When I knocked and entered the room, Mike's father called out with a serious look. "Michelle, my father-in-law, what's the matter?" "I'm sorry. Because of my wife, your plans got ruined." "Huh? Did you hear that earlier?" My father-in-law slowly nodded. Then he pulled something out of the drawer next to his bed and handed it to me. "My father-in-law, this is... Could you do me a favor in my stead?" "But are you sure?" "Yes, I am. It's something I've decided a little while ago." Saying that, he pulled out a voice recorder from under his pillow. When the play button was pressed, an unbelievable voice came out. After hearing everything, I promised to fulfill my father-in-law's wish and went to this one place on a later date. But that was the last thing I was able to do for my father-in-law. 2 weeks later, my father-in-law's condition suddenly worsened in the middle of the night. Even though he was rushed to the hospital by ambulance, it was too late, and he passed away. My husband, who hurried back from out of state, was not able to be there at the end. "Father-in-law, what's the matter?" My mother-in-law, who always claimed it was too much of a hassle, left all the arrangements for the wake and funeral to my husband. We held a simple wake, just with our close family members, and then the day of the funeral arrived. My father-in-law had started his own company when he was alive, and continued to work until the day he collapsed, though he had an extensive network. A large number of people attended the funeral, all showing tears for my father-in-law's death. I exchanged greetings with my father-in-law's acquaintances and waited for the funeral to start. Then my father-in-law, who had been sitting on a chair at the edge, approached me with determination. "Michelle, how long do you plan on staying here?" "Huh?" "Not huh? Now that his care is done, there's no need for you to be here anymore." "Wait, mother-in-law, what are you saying?" "We don't need you anymore. Strangers should just send their condolences and leave." Without caring about the surrounding eyes, my mother-in-law spit out these words as if making fun of me. At her loud voice, the surrounding people started to murmur. My mother-in-law reached out her hand to me and smirked. "Leave your condolence gift and go." At that moment, I felt my blood rush to my head. Who does she think she is? Just leave your condolence gift? We don't need you? This is no joke. How much do you need to insult me to be satisfied? I stepped closer, about to give my mother-in-law a piece of my mind. But the person standing in my way was none other than my husband, Mike. Slowly, with a hard stare at his mother, he began to speak. "That's right, Mom. Strangers are a nuisance." "My dear son, you think the same, right, Mike?" "Yeah, I do. So, could you please leave, Mom? You're not my mother anymore. Just take your stuff and go." "What? Mike, What are you? Desperately clinging to her son, my mother-in-law's face tightens into a forced smile. Her voice trembles, her disturbance clearly visible. Mike turns to me, trying to convey something. Understanding his intention, I explain the situation to my mother-in-law. Mother-in-law? No! Margaret, please, leave immediately. What did you just say? In your position as a daughter-in-law? I'm no longer your daughter-in-law. I'm a complete stranger. What are you talking about? You're not planning to steal that man's inheritance, are you? You've conspired with him and Mike to do this. No way! All of that man's inheritance is mine! No, it's not anything like that. After all, you're not getting a single penny of the inheritance. With the facts laid out clearly, my mother-in-law stares at me, wide-eyed. For some reason, she grabs my collar and raises her voice. Don't mess with me! Always saying whatever you want. I don't want you deciding the distribution of that man's inheritance. It's your husband's will. Oh, really? And? I don't care about his will. As his wife, I'm guaranteed a share of the inheritance. You won't get it. After all, you're divorced from my father-in-law. What? Yes, my mother-in-law is already divorced from my father-in-law, and I was the one who submitted the divorce papers. That day, my father-in-law showed me his divorce papers. Previously, he had made a pact saying, "The next time you commit a misdeed, we'll get a divorce." Out of precaution, he had apparently made my mother-in-law sign the divorce papers. She continued to torment me, even ruining my plans with my best friend. When my father-in-law found out, he was as furious as if it had happened to him. On top of that, she secretly entered my father-in-law's room to steal money, showering him with horrible words like, "Die already! Just pass on and leave the inheritance," etc. These cruel words were recorded by a voice recorder that my father-in-law had hidden by his bedside. Once I finished explaining all of this, the color drained from my mother-in-law's face. In front of her, Mike presented the divorce certification. To my mother-in-law, who was left speechless, I said one last cold sentence. Do you understand? You were long since abandoned by my father-in-law. It's just horrible that you trampled over the feelings of such a kind man. Wait a minute! Without his inheritance, how will I live? You've got to be kidding. Someone as lowly as you have no right to inherit the legacy left by my father-in-law. You should be thankful you've been able to live freely until now. From now on, you'll live a lonely life on a meager social security check. I'll never help you. I hope you suffer more than my father-in-law did when he was sick, and struggled to survive. With these words, my former mother-in-law left, crying. The funeral commenced shortly after, but she never returned. After the funeral, I returned home, but she was nowhere to be found. I packed my belongings and moved to my husband's place. Since we deleted my former mother-in-law's number, we have no idea what kind of life she's living now. Even if she were in trouble, we would not help her. Of course, we have no intention of seeing her either. After the move, Mike and I bought a small Christian shrine and decided to place a picture of his father. I started looking for part-time work nearby, and we returned to our dual income lifestyle. It's busy, but quite fulfilling. Bye, Dad. I'm off now, Mike said. I'm leaving too, father-in-law, I also said, and left. Every morning, we do this, paying respects to the picture of Mike's father before we head to work. It seems like the man in the photo is smiling back at us.
I'm thinking of having her to marry my son. You can't have children, can you? That's why I was against the marriage, to marry to an older woman like you. My mother-in-law spoke these words with a smile, a younger woman sitting beside her. The most important person, my husband, just sat silently next to this young woman. I'm so fed up with his in-laws family. I had left in a huff, but to my surprise, I regretted it immediately and sought to reconcile. Regret fills me as I ponder on the disastrous choice I made marrying into such a family. My name is Olivia, and I am 38 years old. I met my husband, Sam, who is 8 years younger than me, through a friend's introduction. I hesitated to date him because of the age difference, but he passionately declared, "Age doesn't matter. I love the person named Olivia." And we began dating, which eventually led to marriage. About 6 months into our relationship, considering my age and the possibility of marriage, he decided to introduce me to his parents. His mother opposed our marriage because of the age gap. "I thought you'd bring a young, cute bride when you said you were introducing a woman you're considering marrying. Oh dear, 38 years old. Sam, I mean no disrespect, but reconsider. Younger women are better," she said to Sam in front of me. My father-in-law stepped in and said, "If Sam thinks it's good, then it's good, isn't it? Sorry about my wife's rude comments, Olivia." And we managed to obtain approval for our marriage. My father-in-law was a man who would diffuse the harsh words of my mother-in-law, giving the impression of a non-confrontational person. However, once we got married, he often turned a blind eye, which was disappointing. Sam's family was a well-known line of landowners in our small town, and my mother-in-law boasted about it endlessly. Even though, technically speaking, she was not a blood relative of the family, she had married into it just like me. This is an affluent family, and Sam, being the golden boy, has a dreamy, otherworldly charm. The man I was with before Sam was very frugal, which was a struggle, so Sam's generous and easygoing attitude toward money is quite appealing. Although my mother-in-law grudgingly accepted our marriage after being told off by my father-in-law, she doesn't seem to bless it with pleasure. She continually shares her views on how a good wife should behave, which is exasperating. She has a strong presence among the local women and takes pride in being the representative of the Women's Association and being adored by everyone. She insisted I take time off on a weekday to introduce me to the association members. According to her, it's crucial to make a good impression on these people. She introduced me with a sense of satisfaction, but a few of them commented, "You're going to have a hard time too," implying that she wasn't as well liked as she claimed to be. Oh yes, I was also told to get a bridal checkup to confirm my ability to conceive. I can't deny that I was somewhat repulsed by the fact that it was my mother-in-law, not Sam, who ordered this, but honestly, I was also curious about whether I could become pregnant, so I agreed. Gynecological exams, they're not a pleasant experience. Despite being services for women, I wish there was a way to have them without discomfort. Is it just me who finds the waiting time for the examination while seated on that chair incredibly torturous? Overcoming such pain, the results of my bridal health check were good. I felt relieved at the doctor's words, "You're fine." Sam seemed to be worried deep down, and he looked relieved when I told him the results. Of course, I told my mother-in-law about the medical results. I thought that we could now celebrate our marriage happily, but then she said, "Good, you've passed the first hurdle." The first hurdle? What does that mean? I thought she would be happier. Could it be that she was hoping for a bad result? As I wondered how to respond, my mother-in-law made an unexpected proposal. "Once you get married, let's build a duplex and live together. You'll be responsible for half the down payment and mortgage. You work in administration, right? Your salary is probably low, but you should be able to handle that if you've been working until this age." A duplex? Living together? The down payment and mortgage on me? I was confused by this sudden barrage. I glanced at my husband sitting next to me, but he didn't seem to say anything. Come on, help me out. About living together, I haven't heard anything from Sam. Putting aside the fact that she had slighted my job, I had asked about the duplex and living together first. "You haven't heard? Oh, Sam must have thought it was too obvious to say such thing. That's not good. We've always said that when Sam gets married, we'll build a house here and live together." I was chilled. Always? Is she saying that she brainwashed Sam by repeating it over and over?
That's right. That's what I had in mind.
What? I didn't hear about this. Why are you admitting it so easily? I'm sorry, but I wasn't aware of this matter, and I can't decide without discussing it with Sam, so could you hold off on it for now? Saying that, I left my in-laws' house. Later, when I confirmed with Sam, he said that after marriage, he was planning to build a duplex on his parents' property and live with them. I was angry that I hadn't been told, but he said,
"Sorry, I forgot to tell you."
I now think I should have decided not to get married at this point. Sam is kind and handsome, and I thought that given my age, I wouldn't be able to meet someone nice if I let him go, and I went down the wrong path. Now, I would surely be furious that he brushed off the matter of living with his parents as,
"I forgot to tell you."
But at the time, I was charmed by Sam saying, "I'm sorry." I must have been lured by the bait of marriage and had my head in the clouds. As a result, I ended up building a duplex as my mother-in-law wished, and I started married life by bearing half of the down payment and mortgage. Half a year after our marriage, I got pregnant. Just in case, I kept it a secret from my in-laws until I reached a stable period. I thought there might be a chance that something could go wrong. Once I was stable, I reported to my in-laws. Of course, they were overjoyed and were already discussing what to name the baby. They naturally expected it to be a boy, but we still didn't know the sex, so we can't say for sure. There is pressure, but it's nice to be able to make them happy. Taking precautions, I was suggested to quit my job, but since I'm helping out with my family's business, I have a somewhat flexible position. I decided to continue as long as I'm not overdoing it. My pregnancy was going smoothly, and I started to feel the long-awaited movements of the baby. The sensation of a tiny life stirring inside me is somewhat mysterious, yet filled with happiness. I am filled with gratitude for the joy of being born a woman and experiencing this joy. My husband Sam and my in-laws look forward to the baby's growth every time I go for a checkup, and I am eagerly waiting for our child's birth. I have a feeling that my relationship with my mother-in-law will significantly improve once this child is born. One day, when I felt like every day was sparkling, I noticed that the baby's movements were getting weaker. I was consumed with a sense of indescribable anxiety and rushed to the hospital. The doctors told me something was wrong with the baby. Why? How? I was living my life as usual. What did I do wrong? Fear overcame me. Because of the risks, I was hospitalized right away. Despite the doctor's efforts, my child embarked on a journey to heaven. Just a few more months and I could have met my child. Why did it happen so suddenly? It was just yesterday when the baby was moving energetically inside me. Was it my fault? As I cried in sorrow, the words from my supportive husband hit me hard.
"How long are you going to cry? It's over, isn't it? Crying won't bring the baby back. Stop crying."
I was stunned. What was he saying? Our child has just passed away. Despite being surprised by this cold side of Sam I had never seen before, my shattered mental state left me no choice but to remain silent. Then came the day of my discharge from the hospital. Sam didn't come to pick me up. I mustered a smile and assured the nurses who were worried about me going home alone that I would be okay. When I arrived home by taxi, I was greeted by Sam, my mother-in-law, and an unfamiliar woman. "Welcome back. It's a shame, isn't it?" said my mother-in-law with a strange smile. "Yes?" I responded and took a seat on the living room couch as suggested. The seating arrangement was odd, with my mother-in-law and the woman sitting across from me on a bench, and Sam sitting next to them, not making any attempt to comfort me or make eye contact. Then my mother-in-law spoke. "We've discussed this with Sam, but you can't have children anymore, can you? We don't need a daughter-in-law who can't produce an heir, so we thought we'd have this girl marry Sam." Being confronted with such words when I'm still recovering from the shock of the miscarriage?
Tears welled up in my eyes, but I had to stay strong, reminding myself that crying would be admitting defeat. I kept my head down, unable to lift my face. In the face of my despair, my mother-in-law continued mercilessly.
Well, if you are saying that you're willing to earn a living for our family instead of having children, we might consider keeping you. What will you do?
Will I be able to support their living if they leave me behind? What on earth are they talking about? Without thinking, I raised my face to look at my husband. As our eyes met, Sam quickly averts his gaze. Next to him, a woman who seems triumphant is staring at me. I remembered her as Sam's childhood friend. She was introduced to me at our wedding. Seeing that my husband wouldn't even meet my eyes, I thought to myself, he's not on my side, he's not going to help me. A cold breeze swept over me from the top of my head, and strangely, my mind became incredibly sharp. During my hospitalization, they must have had their discussions. They are planning to oust me, the woman who can't bear a child, and bring a younger wife into this house to bear an heir. If I stay here any longer, I will only get hurt. There's absolutely nothing good for me here. I finally understood clearly, so I said, I understand your stance, Sam. Let's divorce. Please live happily with your new wife. And so I left the house. Returning to my family home, my parents, surprised but warm, welcomed me. They were aware of my miscarriage, so they were outraged by the cruelty I had to face so soon after my discharge from the hospital. It was a relief to see a warm reaction after such a long time, and I ended up crying a lot. That day, I fell asleep from crying, but the next day, my mother-in-law and husband, who had chased me out with such cruelty the day before, showed up at my family home. At first, my mother responded normally, but when she realized who they were, she refused to deal with them. Then they began incessantly ringing the doorbell, shouting, "We revoked the divorce! Come back now!" Actually, my family runs a barbecue restaurant. It is a renowned shop that handles a globally famous brand of beer. Many celebrities and athletes come to eat at this tasty place. However, my husband's family is an old, respectable family. They had a negative image of my family, thinking, their family runs a barbecue restaurant. They had this old-fashioned belief that running a restaurant was a shady business and thought our family background was poor. We had invited them to dine once before the marriage, but they declined, saying, "Beef? We've always ate at a designated place. Meat from other restaurants gives me heartburn, sorry." At the pre-wedding meeting, they indirectly belittled my family with remarks like, "Oh, you run a restaurant, don't you? Oh, from your parents' generation. Oh, I see. Beef, huh? Respectable families don't engage in such business." I felt bad for my parents who raised me. My parents dismissed it with a laugh, saying, "There are people with such mindsets." On the day I left after the divorce, my husband and mother-in-law happened to see our restaurant being featured on TV. They had no interest until then and considered my family lower than them. They had panicked and came to call me back after seeing our restaurant being described as operating its own farm that produces brand beef, having extreme popularity with meat being exported all around the world, being extremely successful and making a lot of money. I felt nauseous when they immediately tried to cozy up to me, saying, "If you were rich, we wouldn't have talked about divorce. I'm sorry for yesterday, we weren't thinking right. Please come back." After all that talk about children and heirs, was it all about money in the end? My husband, Sam, and his family didn't inquire about my job in detail, so I had told them I worked in office administration for my family's company, leading them to believe I was a low-paid, incompetent employee. Consequently, they probably thought that if they asked me to shoulder the down payment and mortgage for the house, I'd give up on the marriage. In reality, I am in charge of the meat export division at my parents' company, earning a substantial income for an office worker. Luckily, I had accumulated a good amount of savings due to getting married later in life, enabling me to prepare the money they asked for. I am also a major shareholder in the company, and I hope to eventually take over my father's position to further grow the company. They had never shown even the slightest interest or asked me about this until it was highlighted on TV, changing their treatment of me overnight. They incessantly talked about wanting kids, but it turns out money was their primary concern. I am simply appalled by their shallowness. My father, who had been silently observing the situation, finally lost his temper and kicked Sam and his parents out. "Thank you, Dad, you saved me," I said. My father, still seething with anger, started drinking and cursing at them. He had me explain everything from before the marriage without holding back any details. Believing I wouldn't be able to handle this alone, my father promptly contacted a lawyer he knew, leading to a demand for damages. Since I was unjustly evicted, we also asked for a reimbursement for the housing funds I had provided during our cohabitation. The claim was acknowledged, and it was decided that I would receive a refund for the expenses I covered. However, Sam alone couldn't repay the loan I'd taken on, so his family home had to be sold. Because they had built a luxurious house on a rural property just for show, even after selling it, there was a considerable mortgage left that Sam and his parents would have to pay. Moreover, it was a house filled with the eccentricities of Sam's mother, so finding a buyer willing to accept it as is seemed doubtful, implying that disposal could take time. Fortunately, they managed to sell some land they owned separately, allowing me to get my money back first, which was a relief. At this point, I was glad I married into a landlord's family. Sam and his parents were forced to leave their beloved two-family home and now seem to be scraping by in a rented apartment, struggling to repay their loan. Oh, and about the woman who was planning to remarry Sam, who was a childhood friend, she was only interested because she thought she'd live in a large house and that his family was wealthy. As soon as she found out that they were going to lose the house and still be in debt, she disappeared. I believe it was the right decision for her to run away, because if she had married him, she might have been forced to have a child, and perhaps even made to work because of her young age. This area is still quite rural, so word spreads fast. For better or worse, gossip is quick to circulate, especially when it involves a well-known family like Sam's. People seem to be buzzing with interest, making comments like, "They treated the wife terribly and drove her out. They used to show off their big house, but now they're in debt and living in an apartment. Having been abandoned by both the wife and potential new wife, their family line will probably end with this generation." It's amazing to see how accurate the rumors are, and to wonder where and who saw all this. The power of a rural network is truly something to be reckoned with. So, it seems like my bossy mother-in-law, who used to strut around like she owned the place, is now sneaking around even to do her shopping, concerned about other people's gazes. My parents told me, "We told you not to marry into a family that would insist on testing whether you could get pregnant before marriage, didn't we?" and shrugged off the whole situation. They even consoled me in a strange way, saying, "Oh, Olivia just rushed into marriage a bit. Don't worry about it. It's fine if you stay home all the time." They try to be considerate in their own way. We had our share of troubles, being kicked out, going to court, but I can tell that they are happy to be able to live with their daughter again. I am grateful for my parents' warmth. It seemed as if I was just dreaming or seeing a nightmare about my married life that I'm living freely now. I might have a divorce under my belt, but I'm still in my 30s. I haven't given up on marriage. Once things settle down, I plan to work hard to find a new partner. But, well, until I find the next right person, maybe I should spend a lot of time doing good things for my parents.